All right, gang, welcome back. We're on our 11th chapter where we're looking today at the 7th and the 10th commandments, and there's obviously a little bit of a relationship between them. The 7th commandment, thou shalt not steal, and the 10th commandment is you shall not covet your neighbor's goods. And there's a relationship there. There's an underlying question, I think, that's involved with these two particular things, because like in the song, it's talking about stealing. I don't think most people have a problem with that. Most people recognize that it's wrong to walk into a store and steal stuff. And most people recognize, but maybe have a harder time. They do see and have a struggle with their neighbor's goods and wanting what their neighbor has, their shoes, their car, their whatever it might be, their video game system. But I think, again, most of us recognize that that's wrong, but I think there's a deeper question than just, do you steal stuff from stores? And it was also in the song. It's the underlying problem is with the part of the song where they're saying, it's mine, it's all mine. That's the inherent thought that's behind somebody who goes in and steals something. That's the inherent thought behind somebody who thinks that it's not fair that my neighbor has that, I should have that thing. And so some of these things to think about as we dive beneath the surface of the commandment. How do I use the gifts that I've been given? Is it mine, all mine? Is that what it is with my gifts? And then is it so it's something that I've earned and I deserve all of these things? As soon as we start to say that I deserve anything, we should probably watch out and start paying attention, because we're getting into dangerous water. We don't deserve anything, and all of the gifts that have been given to us are given to us by God. And I think hopefully we realize that. Our education, the family circumstance that we were born into, you have no control over that. You could have just as easily been born, and you could be a kid that is on the trash heap looking for food in Mexico City. It has, so many, all of the things that we have, even those things which took personal work and dedication, are things that have been given to us by God and through the circumstances that God has placed us in. So we have to watch out if we start thinking that we deserve things. How do I think of the gifts that my neighbor has been given? How do I look at those objects? Do I think of them as objects, or do I recognize that they've been given to that neighbor? And then also, how do we as a community, as a state, as a city, as a country, as a world, how do we look at the gifts that we've been given, and how do we use those gifts? Do we as a country or as a community, do we think of these gifts as things that these are mine to be used? Everything is mine. It's all mine for consumption and for use. Or is it in fact something that's been given to us by God to use wisely and to use them well? That's the question I think that we're looking at today. And those are really important questions that go beneath the surface. There's two scripture stories that have to deal with how we treat the poor. And that's really ultimately, I think, what we're going to tie all this back into. How do I treat and look at the objects of my neighbors? And how do I think of the objects that I'm consuming? Do I take for myself? Is it all about me? Or do I recognize the poor people and others around me who also need those gifts that I've been given and are thus, asking me to help use them for that good? There's that beautiful story in the Gospel of the Lazarus at the rich man's door. There's literally a poor man, a starving man who's covered in sores and all of these things, and it's being set out in the Bible. And it's a parable. And there is a rich man who literally has to step over every day. He goes in and out of his gate and his rich home, and he steps over this poor man and doesn't even hardly, acknowledge his presence, and so on and so forth. And it says at the end of time that when the guy dies that night, the rich man finally dies, he goes to heaven, or he goes to hell and sees the poor man up in heaven. And I think it's a beautiful story in the sense of this. Jesus is warning about the difficulties that riches give us. Jesus is not saying riches and gifts and talents and all these things are bad. He's saying if you have been given them, but you don't use them wisely, that's really bad, because it harms us, not just because it makes Jesus mad. Jesus isn't saying that. He's saying we're harming ourselves when we keep stuff for ourselves, when we don't turn outward and when we don't share the gifts that have been given to us. So this is important for us. Most of us don't have any poor people living literally outside their door, and we don't have to step over the poor anymore. Because of the way the world is constructed, we oftentimes live removed from the people who are struggling in those ways and with who are poor and experiencing extreme poverty. So they might be in a different neighborhood, or they might even be in a different country, a different part of the world. that allows us to not have to confront them and see poverty every day. And so we can start to tell ourselves that there's not a lot of poverty that's out there. But we are, very oftentimes, unfortunately, we are the rich man who is stepping over the poor and is ignoring the poor around the world. This past weekend's gospel is also a beautiful story about stealing and its opposite, which is being generous and sharing with other people. About how the woman who put in 2 small coins, but she gave everything that she had, and that is what it is that is healthy and good for us to do and what pleases God. When we keep for ourselves, like the rich people in that story, who they still put money in the church basket, but they gave out of their extra. And Jesus is saying when we give out of our very livelihood, when we give everything that we have, that's when we realize how much God loves us and we see how much God gives to us and takes care of us. So we have some beautiful stories recently in the Bible. Just some images of the poor. Again, we're not going to look at hundreds and hundreds of them, but we do need to constantly be keeping the poor in our mind. They need to be before us daily. And we need to be thinking about them. And when I think that I deserve something or I need something or I have to have this thing or that thing, are we thinking about the poor? And are we remembering the reality that over half the world lives on less than $1 a day? I mean, that is an amazing statistic. Half of the world lives on less than $1 a day. Poverty, we are so ridiculously blessed in the United States that we can't even really start to understand it probably until we go somewhere else and see it. See how most of the rest of the world is living. And that should cause us great sadness, and also it should be a call to arms by us, that we should be looking for ways, how can I share what I have, all these amazing things that I have, and help other people. So often the thing that makes me keep for myself is precisely I see my neighbors and I see they have the Xboxes and the PlayStations and they have the new shoes and the new clothes and the new outfits and all those sorts of things. That keeps us oftentimes then from being generous with others because precisely we are coveting our neighbor's goods. And so we have to have a real awakening, I think, in our country as Americans and as Catholics in America, recognizing the needs that other people have around us and stop keeping so much for ourselves. Again, another image, this is a very common image throughout most of the world. Children, who are forced to, and adults who are forced to eat the scraps or are looking for food amongst the trash of the world, and so on and so forth. We need to be remembering this. You would do well to have this image maybe printed off or something like it and hanging up in your bathroom window every morning, reminding you when you go to school or you go wherever how blessed you really are and how blessed we really are. So ways in which we can violate the 7th commandment. There are a lot of things besides walking out of, stealing bubble gum from a store. We can be guilty of stealing by committing, obviously, robbery, but also borrowing property but not returning it, by working poorly or giving a poor performance at our job. That's stealing because we owe our employee our just efforts. We can violate the 7th commandment through the sin of bribery, through identity theft, through excessive gambling, because we're now, it's okay to do some small recreational things if it's for fun, just here or there, but very small. As soon as we get into that, we're wasting money and throwing money away. And again, keeping it for ourselves and our own entertainment. Vandalism is a way in which we violate the 7th commandment. I remember there was a time when I was in high school and some friends and I went around. Fortunately, I didn't participate in it, but I was still in the car and I wasn't saying anything about it. Guys hitting people's mailboxes with baseball bats and so forth, right? That's stealing, right? I mean, I knew it was wrong, and I think everybody knew it was wrong. But that's stealing. That's taking away from somebody their own just because we wanted to go out and be, whatever we wanted to be, entertaining or stupid, combination of both. Wastefulness is a violation of the 7th commandment. Anytime you throw food away, you are stealing, and there was a Catholic early church father, one of the early saintly people, who said that anytime we throw food away, we are stealing that from another person's plate. We have to use all of the resources anytime we're wasting any resources, but particularly food, I think, we're stealing in a sense. Trafficking and stolen goods. So I might not have stolen the item, but I know it was stolen by someone. Charging unfair interest rates. That can be a way of stealing. You see some of those places in the inner city that charge people ridiculous rates on their, we'll give you cash right now to help you, but we're going to charge you all of this interest on your, when we give you that loan. And so that's a way of bilking people and stealing from them. Business fraud, knowing that you are, working the numbers in your business differently so that you can get more for yourself or keep more. Cheating on forms or lying for financial gain. All of those things are violations of the seventh commandment. Restitution is a solution to that. And restitution is a word, what we talk about that, we say we're paying back a person who was wronged through violating the seventh commandment. Anytime we steal from someone, we can always make restitution. So if we steal from a store, we can go back and pay and say, hey, we don't have to do it face to face. We can write an anonymous letter. I stole from you guys last month. I want to make restitution. You can go back if you stole money on your taxes. You can go back and make restitution and say, I caught a mistake, or I made an intentional mistake and I want to make restitution. All these things, vandalism. If you hit somebody's mailbox, you can go back a year later, 5 years later, whenever. Say, hey, just write a note. I'm sorry, I knocked your mailbox over we are stupid. Here's some money. I hope that this helps cover or helps pay back the cost that was for you. Any of those types of things, when we violate the seventh commandment, we can always make restitution. And so I encourage everybody that comes to the confessional, if they confess this particular sin, I always encourage them and ask them to go make restitution for that sin that they committed. The 10th commandment, coveting our neighbor's goods, some different ways we can do that through greed. That's a desire to amass earthly goods without limit. Avarice is when we have a passion for riches and power, trying to grab more stuff for ourselves. That's called avarice sometimes. And envy is a word for the sadness at the sight of another's goods. So when I see someone else with some material property, I'm sad because I want it for myself. We should be thankful and happy for all those people that have things, and hopefully also pray that they learn how and are sharing their goods with other people. We have what's called here at the end, I want to just talk really briefly about this. We'll get more into this as the years go by. Catholic social teaching or social doctrine of the church. This is a hugely important thing, and this kind of deals with how we may be stealing and issues of how am I using my goods on a national or an international level. The church came out about 200 years ago and said as industry was rising and nations were growing, the church said, we've reached a new era of employment where people were now working on machines and with machinery and all these kinds of things that came about through the Industrial Revolution. The church said we need to be able to teach the world how to enter into this new way of dealing with things, how to do it and how to do it in a way that's in accordance and harmony with the gospel. And so the church puts forward this group of things. It's there's different essays, different letters from popes, different teachings, but it's all kind of combined into one little book there that's called the Compendium of Catholic Social Teaching, the Compendium of Social Doctrine. I think it's one of the great things about the church. It was a class that I taught the seniors every year, Catholic Social Teaching. We're going to dive into that a lot more, but I just wanted to start out with it today. Some of the things that Catholic Social Teaching says, some of the themes, and we'll talk about a lot more of them, about how we should interact with people and politics and so forth, and just the poor on the national and international level. One of the themes of Catholic social teaching is that we should be good stewards of the gifts that God has given to us, whether that's as a person, but also as a nation and as a world. So Laudato Si, which was Pope Francis's recent letter that he wrote on the environment, is also involved. How do we take the gifts that God has given to us through the environment? How do we use them responsibly? Stewardship is, the word steward is like when you're in charge of someone. And so you are the steward of a country or something like that. You are in charge. You are placed over that. And then you are asked to be the person as a steward who takes and decides who needs what and distributes the goods among everyone, hopefully fairly. Stewardship then is the same thing being done in our own hearts and as nations and etc., as states and so forth. We're supposed to take and recognize that we've been given gifts, whether they're spiritual gifts or mental gifts or academic gifts or material gifts and money and land and all that. okay, God has given me this stuff. Now, as a steward of those gifts, how should I use them? How should I spread them out? How much should I give to the poor? How much should I put back over here? How much should I give to this person? That's what stewardship is involved in. That's something that we really have to be people that are praying, Lord, help me be the best steward of these gifts that you've given me that I possibly can be. Help me to grow in this area. So that's stewardship, and you hear that a lot. Another theme of the Catholic social teaching is called the universal destination of goods. And that's the belief or the teaching that among the goods and the things that we've been given and the world, that God has given us enough stuff in the world basically to help everybody have the basic necessities of life met. On this planet right now, we have everything that we need to meet the basic necessities of life for every person that's here. It's not like God has not given us enough stuff. God has given us enough stuff. The problem is that for whatever reason, for lots of reasons, for selfishness, because of wars and hatred and all these other things, prejudices, these goods that God has given are not getting to everyone. That's why most of the world lives in poverty and lives on less than $1 a day. Because of these things, these goods that God has given to us as a world are not reaching everyone fairly. And so we have to be thinking about that, particularly as a wealthy nation, as a wealthy person. We have to be thinking about how can we do and how can I help cause us to do a better job as a nation and as a world of helping the goods get to everyone. That's what we mean when we say the universal destination of goods. And then finally, the right to private property, kind of tied into that. We believe as a church that everybody has a right to have property, to have a piece of land that they can use. Take a piece of that land that God has given us. Everybody deserves to be able to try and work that land and bring about a harvest and bring about some wealth and work for themselves. A lot of stuff is tied up into that. But we just need to, we'll just leave it at that for now. Helping other nations is in the Catechism. And this is really about, I think it's in a way, hopefully we hear ourselves being challenged in this. Rich nations have a grave moral responsibility toward those which are unable to ensure the means of their development by themselves. So if you have a wealthy nation, we have an obligation to help those that are still developing. It is a duty in solidarity and charity, and also an obligation of justice. Justice is giving to the person what they are owed, right? So it's about solidarity with other people and joining in one with them and recognizing, hey, we're all one in this, every human person. It's an issue of charity, which is reaching out in love to others. It's an issue of justice and giving them what they're deserved and what everybody is owed. If the prosperity of the rich nations has come from resources that have not been paid for fairly. So we need to recognize that we just have a lot of resources in our nation. We didn't have to pay for them. We didn't own them. They were just there. They're part of our land. And so we have to ask ourselves, can we be better stewards as a rich and wealthy nation of these gifts that we've been given? Can we be helping other people? Can we do a better job of that? This class, there's no homework for you. You can just email me and let me know that you watched the class, and we'll call that your homework for today. Hope you have a great weekend. Be safe, and hope you're doing well. Again, if I can ever do anything, let me know and know that I'm praying for you. God bless.